This is Shar-day with Houston Community College's Financial Aid Department. There are a lot of social media challenges going around about the letter D. But this is HCC Financial Aid Challenge for that degree. Let's go. Fill out my FAFSA early for that degree.
Hey.
Low key in debt for that degree.
Ooh.
My financial coach set up a plan for me to pay back my loans for that degree.
Hey.
Scholarships for that degree.
Okay.
Work 2 jobs for that degree.
Right.
Got work study for that degree.
Hey.
Buy my books for that degree. Pull all-nighters for that degree.
Woo.
All in the lab for that degree.
Hey.
Hey, professor, you think that maybe I can get some extra points for that degree? A lot of sacrifice for that degree.
Woo.
Geeked up for that degree.
Hey.
At HCC, we out. Hello, everyone. My name is Shar-day Campbell, and I serve as the Communications and Social Media Coordinator for the Financial Aid Department at Houston Community College. Full disclosure, I went back and forth on whether I should show the video first and then share background about it, or whether I should just, introduce it before showing the video. I typically don't walk out to music, so I figured, hey, why not? Please don't judge me. I have more to share today. So, financial aid made me a rapper. Not like a real rapper, like something between Kids Bop and like McDonald's songs and commercials. I have about 4 songs now in a scholarship contest where students create songs about smart money moves. It's called Houston Money Moves. And last year the students won a scholarship in a meet and greet with Paul Wall. I've considered adding hip hop pedagogy to my resume. It's possible. In all seriousness, I had never attempted or desired to make a song before that video. So here's the background behind it. It was 2017, shortly after Hurricane Harvey hit Houston. Aid had not dispersed yet, and our communities were obviously still actively in recovery mode. Social media quickly became the medium that our students turned to get answers about their money, and I was the one behind the screens responding to them. It was during this time that a social media challenge called For the D went viral. The premise was that everyone rapped on the same beat about what they would do for the D. And yes, it's what you think it means. My first reaction was that this is legit terrible, and the only D you need to be worried about is that degree. So I took the viral challenge and flipped For the D to For that degree. It had nearly 20,000 organic views, and its largest reach was on Facebook because at the time I had limited access to the school's YouTube and Instagram channels. I'll share a little bit about that later. I was initially apprehensive to share the video because we hadn't dispersed aid yet. I took the risk of releasing the video because viral challenges have an expiration date, and I had to act quickly. Overall, and I also was concerned, they were going to be like, you got time to dance, but you're going to have time to disperse. I had one student say it. And then the other student came back and was like, actually, you don't get your disbursement to 30 days after. Look at you all learning processes. Overall, I talked about different types of aid and the sacrifices students have to make for that degree. It resonated well and students connected with the content. Before joining Houston Community College, I had done media relations and communications for multiple industries. On my first day at HCC in 2016, I walked in with no financial aid experience into a newly created position. My executive director, Joelle Insoucier, who created my role, told me that I would be the one to shape what this role was to the financial aid office. She then asked me, what's your goal for the role? I said, simply put, I would like to humanize financial aid. In order to humanize a brand, you have to build connections. And yes, financial aid does have a brand. It's how others identify and connect to our services. It's how I think we're all intimately familiar with what we're known for and what our brand is in financial aid. It's no secret that financial aid has some built-in barriers to connection. There are regulatory constraints, complex concepts that have to be decoded for students and their families to make financial decisions, a power dynamic that only students with help-seeking behaviors can overcome, a legacy of patriarchal processes that make students with special circumstances disengage or frankly give up, financial gaps that aren't being covered fully by financial aid, narratives about the promise of college not being worth the debt, and broken processes affecting outcomes. Truly prioritizing connection is an act of disruption when it should be the standard in the pursuit of student success. But where do we start? We start by making communications a priority and not a side project. I say this not with a lack of sensitivity or understanding of the budget constraints financial aid offices are facing, but with an urgency that we can't afford to continue putting communications on the plate of already overworked financial aid professionals who don't necessarily have a background in communications. We need to move to a model that calls for a dedicated communications role in the financial aid office. When you have dedicated communications support at the table when decisions are being made, they'll offer a different perspective that often can shift approaches. One thing many people don't know about my role is that I play an active role in mapping processes. Processes drive what needs to be communicated. In order to accurately create content, I have to organically hear the methodology of how we're rolling out something. I often inform process creation by asking, what if, what's next, and why should a student care? Oftentimes, the creation of communication exposes unnecessary complexities. Everything can't be solved by a communication. Sometimes we have to own up to how our complex processes are creating breakdowns that even the best communication cannot solve. If there's a way to simplify the process, it will allow for me to simplify the content. Sometimes it's as simple as that. In order to connect, we have to be a beacon of clarity in the midst of complexity. Communication does not happen because we distributed a communication or fulfilled the requirement of sending a disclosure. It happens when students understand their options, next steps, and what happens if they don't take those steps. Notice I said the students we have. Connection happens when people feel that content was created for them. That takes communicating for the students we have and not the ones we wish we had. In a perfect world, students would not scan emails. They would read the whole email. They would click on those hyperlinks we give them as resources, and they would quickly complete call to actions. Those are not the students we have. And if we're honest, that's not even who we are. We're moving fast, we scan emails, and sometimes we miss the call to action too. When we communicate for the students we have, we will give deep consideration to feasibly simplifying processes. Consider the timing of communications so students will not receive content that's not related to them or where they are in the process. We'll add value by offering clarity. We'll format content in a way that does not bury important call to actions or next steps. We'll use words that mean something to the student and not to us. Side note, I'm an advocate for real words for real college students. And lastly, we'll make sure we're consistently delivering the same message on all platforms and in person. One thing I pointed out when joining the financial aid office is that we're underestimating how many ways we were communicating. It's bigger than emails, texts, and a website. For us, there's surveys, calls, live chats, forms, checklist descriptions, in-person events, social media brochures, and flyers. A lot of our platforms provide data that can serve as an opportunity for us to listen to what's not being said. So case in point, if you send out a communication with 3 call to actions, let's say one call to action is in the first paragraph. The body of the message is some regulatory content about why you're sending the message. And then the last 2 call to actions are at the bottom of the email. And when you send a communication, you notice that students didn't handle the last two call to actions. Do you write it off as the students not reading, or do you listen to what's not being said? What isn't being said is that reformatting the content, or maybe perhaps breaking up that communication into more than one communication, may yield a better outcome. We can't assume that technology or another platform is the answer to solving barriers to connection. I realize that's a pretty bold statement at a conference hosted by a technology vendor, so, please don't cut my mic off. So much of the meet students where they are approach is rooted in meeting them on social media, because that's where all the young people are, right? There's some truth to that. However, social media is not a standalone solution or a magic technology pill for connection. It has to be a part of a larger communication strategy that aligns with institutional priorities. Social media is an opportunity to be an extension of your customer service arm. A good entry point to social media is answering questions or concerns that come through the channel. I had a student who I advised through Facebook Messenger for about a year. Once she realized someone was there to answer her questions, she kept asking them. She was a dependent student who was selected for verification, had unusual enrollment history, and was not meeting SAP. Sis had a lot going on. She stayed in consistent contact on social media, and it eventually got to the point where she would send me her grades. She was like, I did good, I passed my test. I was like, you go, girl. I sent her a Beyonce gift. After about a year, you can say we had a connection. After about a year, she stayed in consistent contact, and in the fall of 2018, she worked her way back up to meeting SAP. When you think about a student who has unusual enrollment history, that means they're hopping around schools. Something at that school was not being provided to them. I can't say that I was the only reason she stayed at HCC, but what I can say is that she found a champion in me. And she was able to work her way back and get through her financial aid journey. I haven't heard from her since, so I guess she's okay. In my 2 years on social media, I found that 90% of the questions about financial aid are pretty neutral. I know there's this fear of it being this Voltrex of angry students, mad about not getting their money. But again, it's pretty neutral. Students genuinely want to know their options and what to expect next. The For That Degree video was part of my weekly Financial Aid Fridays social media series that supports a larger communications plan. It also wasn't the last time I took something viral and made it about financial aid. It's kind of my thing. There's a method to it, though, and it's deeply rooted in connection. If I use content that people are already connecting with and then make it about financial aid, I've created another opportunity for a connection. My goal is to create digital content that is timely, helpful, conversational, and relevant with a touch of humor. Just enough touch that I don't get touched by the board of trustees or anything. And although a lot of engagement comes from humor, my most popular post was an image from the Department of Education about the new FAFSA opening up. It's that simple sometimes. The timing of it worked, and it started a conversation and a whole thread about early FAFSA submission, because it was around the time that they were still getting acclimated with the FAFSA opening October 1st. For me, social media is a way to amplify what's been distributed through other channels. When I started, I got access to the institution's Facebook and Twitter. Instagram was reserved for highly curated branded content. I decided to not create a separate channel for financial aid content, because then I would have to simultaneously focus on building an audience and creating content. Plus, if we truly want to meet students where they are, then we shouldn't make them come to us. Trust me, I do know what financial aid officers are facing when it comes to challenges of getting content out through the institution's main social media channels. But you must keep pushing. I'm not sure if there was like some special convening of institutions where communications folks gathered and they said, ha, we're going to decide not to put any content to tell students how to get here, how to get admitted, or how to pay for it. When I first started, I was like, okay, maybe I can benchmark content that's already being created. And what I found was that it's just not a lot of content. There were a couple of schools that had started admissions channels, but just not a lot on main social media pages. When you think about students who have to make decisions, it's bigger than pretty pictures on campus. It's bigger than broad alumni engagement on social media. We have to shift how we approach and use social media to get out the content to help students make decisions. The status quo about that must be broken. With a dedicated financial aid communications role, communication and connection is possible. Student success is not this one-time effort or singular initiative. It's a continuous cycle of improvement, listening, agile pivoting, execution, and connection. We have an opportunity to change the narrative about financial aid. Making connection a priority in the financial aid office is proof of our commitment to student success. Thank you.